Good evening and welcome to the Irish Art Show, broadcast from the Scientology Community Centre. Tonight we bring you a special guest from County Meath. He is a poet, film director, producer, editor, and very passionate about the nature preservation. Randal Plunkett is the 21st Baron of Dunsany. Tonight he will read a selection of his poems, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him about his life and his work. Please welcome Randal Plunkett.
No road left. Our time is nearing its conclusion. The harvest has failed. We will not survive winter. I'll leave on a journey to a place where no one can follow. The pain we carry, we will carry till the end of our lives. This is the last time we will ever see each other. I will walk till my feet can no longer take me, lying down in front of a great tree. This is my final resting place. The cold will crawl across my body. The snow will blanket me. Time will stop for a moment. I'll watch the sun pierce through the trees. My heart will finally stop. I'll hear the sounds of the hawk call. Then only silence. Meanwhile, in a faraway land, you'll brave the winter, finding strength in those around you, living with a great piece of your heart missing. Life will continue nonetheless, with a dark cloud covering the land, till the day the light will finally break through, illuminating the once orchards of sweet fruit, ushering in the first day of spring. Already old and closer to the end than the beginning, you will watch families grow and leave. On your deathbed, you will think of me and wonder if I ever found what I was looking for. No home to give me shelter. I cross the threshold and move forward. All around me is a desert of thorns and unripe olives, once a garden of Eden, now a desolate wasteland. My nostril fills with the scent of eucalyptus, bathed in a bed of rosemary. I press on, my mind a race. Am I in danger? If I die here, would anyone ever even find me? I see you, the last remnants of a structure built from dreams. O great palace of dreams, how thee has become worn by the cruelty of time. I enter you, calm and tranquil, like a soldier returning from a decade of war. I see our once great table, where we feasted into the night, all so many years ago. I wonder your so many rooms. Bats fly past my head and rats scuttle. I'm scared, but I do not leave. I sit down and behold this once great place. Why have I come here? Have you passed your passion for this place to me? Like sensations do for time. I hold my ear to the wall and I listen, waiting for your whisper. I hold my breath. Your gentle rumble answers no question. Then I hear a voice say, "Sun is setting. I must leave now, or risk becoming swallowed by your hunger." I walk down the path and look at you one last time. The voice bids me farewell. This was a story about a property that my father had and dreamed about, and it was destroyed by a fire, and nobody had gone there for many, many years. And I eventually went back and found only ruins. And I wrote this poem to remind me never to forget the dreams of my fathers. Emeralds. Then I'm 19. I walk empty streets through libraries of glass, with only the sounds of tortured souls whispering in my ears. Your fragile porcelain skin is today's obsession. I contemplate what will become of your skin. Will you age? Where will you be in 30 years? Will tears leave paths through those pale cheeks? Will those bright eyes of promise be sunken with a future paved in misfortune? What will I be like? Will time wither me? Or perhaps I was born an exception? Will I die leaving a crater that will be devoured by fields of grass? Once a powerful tree that tried to touch the sky, but cut short by hurricanes. My body swallowed by flames. My only mark in this world is a stump in a field. I sit on a bench and watch the time go by. Who are these people I see around me? Will you fade into the crowd like them, engulfed by oceans of meaninglessness? I think about my future trip to a distant land named a color. I will cross the wastelands of ice and snow and disappear, never to be seen again. As the cold takes me, the wolves will hear me laugh. I picture your curls. You look at me as we silently kiss. Your silence I find so beautiful. Will you be loyal? Will you be kind? Will I save you from yourself? Or is it me that needs saving? I awake on my boat, coughing from the salt water, which cuts my skin like glass. I'm 37 now. I've cast away, and the storm is in pursuit. This will be my final entry in my diary. I will never arrive at my destination. The paths have vanished, and I see the wave that will bury me rise to strike. I look up and see you on the street corner, an emerald amongst the rust. There are two of you walking, future and present. I smile. I now have my answer to the riddle I ponder. I brave the first hit. The second wave knocks me into the sea. I sink into the darkness below. I smile as I descend into blackness. I stare up at the fading light above. The sound of the trumpets call me. I want to utter your name one last time. I want this to be my last word. This memory is the last thing I hold on to you. I ready myself. My last word will be triumphant. I muster my weakening body and I mouth. Blueprint to my world built on failure. I stare at my skin, rough like bark. I am no longer young. This place holds no further opportunities for me. I wonder how I got here. Was my path chosen, or did I carve this world for myself? Now, having buried my father and my mother, I sit alone listening to the sounds of empty rooms that once breathed joy. I wonder, should I have been bothered? The distance traveled feels so irrelevant. I eat alone, staring at a TV. Another day, another tragedy. How many times will I spend Christmas pondering my death? Who will find my body? Which room will it be in? Will I die at the table or at my desk? Who will look after my dogs when I'm gone? Will anyone miss me? The water leaks from the ceiling as I wander through the house of many rooms. I smile at the thought of how much I have lost. If I was born someone else, would my life have been different? I guess we'll never know. I will watch my pets wither and die. My world grows darker every day. I'm lost in a maze of darkness. I will never escape. I stare at the tree from my dirty window. It's twisted and bent from the weight of the world. I smile. Perhaps I'm not alone after all. And lastly, sundial that tells no more time. Our journey nears its end. Every day I wander fields of green with the thoughts of time. Where have our lives gone? What do you see when I stand in the light? What will I do when the one who walks these paths is me? What is it like feeding the weeds growing past your eyes? We have so little time. Soon the night will be upon us and our paths will vanish. Do you feel lonely? Do you feel sad? Given another chance, would you have done things differently? I remember the day you nearly broke your hand in anger, on that sad day in May. Do you fear leaving the warmth of the sun? Is it hard knowing so many things are left undone? When it comes, my time, will I be like this sundial, lost among the weeds in a place where time has ceased to be?
Wow, I enjoyed every part of that performance from Randal Plunkett. I loved his poetry. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it. Obviously, one of my favourites was Emeralds, so that's great. And also, yeah, we're going to talk to him now. You're very, very welcome to the Irish Art Show. Randal, how are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me here.
You're very welcome. We're delighted to have you here.
Well, I feel very welcome.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed yourself?
Absolutely.
It's good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a bit nervous about the stage because
Yes.
I haven't opened up that book and read anything of it since probably it was written.
When did you write the book?
So it's funny because that book, I wrote those things and posted them on social media just as a way to kind of, I suppose when I write or when someone paints, and my father used to be a painter, you'd sketch first. So you'd sketch out ideas and you'd kind of present something. And then, then you'd come up with the main project. So it started just as that. It was keeping the brain kind of active and creative. It's like practice, like knocking a tennis ball against the wall. It's not a game of tennis, but you're getting better at your, whatever you call that. Your
Swing.
Swing,
Is it?
exactly. That's the one. So yeah, and then that was put together by a friend, and then that turned into the book. And I'm really glad because the pictures you didn't get to see while I was reading it, but they were pictures that were taken as I was watching my estate rewild. Right. And there was this whole juxtaposition of dead trees and broken old buildings with nature just bursting out of it. So how could you not write about
Absolutely.
that? And it reminded me a lot of the things that I was going through because there's a bit of a dark period. And you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself, or you can do something about it. And I decided I would write some poetry and take some pictures.
And you said that you feel that your poetry has a kind of a doom feel to it. Obviously, that makes sense. But I feel like it's also a healing thing when you're writing. When I listen to the words that you write, it's such depth in it. So obviously, there's things going on in your life as well as just creating a poem around it. It's fabulous.
I'm sort of a goth. I never grew out of that, unfortunately. My parents would be most displeased, but yeah. So I kind of I do use my work as a way of getting things out off my chest. I think when you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of pain, and things like that through life, it can bog you down. But you have to be very good at letting out the pressure. And for me, I discovered that one of the most magical ways to be happy is to create. To express
Absolutely.
yourself. I think the unhappiest people in life are people who can't express themselves. In fact, I believe wars are started because people can't truly express themselves. So for me, I go to bed happy every night because I'm able to express myself, and I figured out the secret sauce on how to do it. And it comes in many different shapes and sizes. But the thing is, by doing, I am living.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I like, obviously, you've so much going on. Obviously, you're the 21st Baron of Dunsany, which is very exciting. You're an Irish film director, producer and editor, as well as landowner and holder of one of the oldest surviving Irish peerage titles. And one of the longest inhabited in Ireland, Dunsany Castle and its remaining estate. How does it feel to be a Baron? Is there a weight that comes with that? And, as I said to you before the interview, yeah, I was probably wrong, but I said, how have barons changed over the years? How, what would have been like from the first baron to now the 21st?
Well, I don't have a sword anymore, and it
good.
takes me a week to hoover. So I suppose that's the difference. It's like 1 week to hoover and a whole lot of cobwebs. Oh, if cobwebs were money, well, I'd be Trump.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite the thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and every time I always describe Dunsany as a giant stone baby that will never grow up. It'll keep you up at night. You'll have to mother it at middle of the night. You'll have to have all these things. It's very expensive, But at the same time, it's a joy because you've got something that has touched so many generations, something that, you know, means something. It's more than a building, it's an idea.
What year was it built, actually, do you know?
So 1180.
1180,
yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So we've been here a while. In fact, my family has been here. The first record of my family being in Ireland was 1050. So another 50 years, and we're almost native. So yeah.
Unbelievable.
Exactly.
How exciting is that for you to have that heritage? I think it's really exciting. I think most people would like to actually have, you know, have that heritage behind them. And know about their ancestors a little bit more.
I think so, because, you know, it's losing connection with your heritage is a very sad thing, because, I mean, it reminds us so much of our throwaway world that we kind of just forget things. And forgetting is kind of associated with age. And I'm very fortunate to be able to have so much insight into the people who came before me. And our philosophy at Dunsany has always been a bit different than other families. We kind of fixate on the fact that we are not individuals. We are part of a movement. We are a progression. Or, as I like to say, a piece of a bigger painting.
Yeah.
So I am just the bit of black in the corner.
You're holding that space of Castle, you know, Dunsany Castle,
Exactly.
And keeping the heritage going for your time, and then it moves on.
Yeah. And the
it's
thing is,
handleable.
life is very simple when you are born with a purpose.
Yes.
And the reality of it is everybody has a mortgage, everybody has to do what they have to do to survive, but it's simple when you boil down the meaning of your life as something that is something for a greater cause. It actually makes life a lot easier in a lot of ways. And at the same time, puts a lot of pressure. But I think anything worthwhile doesn't come easy. And the more you struggle for something, I think the more value you put on it. And I've struggled quite a bit, and I wouldn't change a moment.
I think everybody struggles, and if you come out of it the other end, it makes you stronger.
It's called living.
You grow.
Yeah,
You grow.
absolutely.
And you know, when I knew I was interviewing you, I was obviously looking forward to interviewing you and hearing all about you, but I didn't realise that you had some, I suppose, other famous family members like Joseph Mary Plunkett and St. Oliver Plunkett. Could you tell us a little bit about that, actually?
So, my family has a few rock stars in it. So Joseph Mary
Including you.
Well, thank you very much. But yeah, no, Joseph Mary Plunkett was a cousin, and he was involved in the Republic. Then you had St. Oliver Plunkett, who is one of Ireland's patron saints. Didn't do so well. Got hung, drawn, and quartered and set on fire, and his head is currently sitting in Drogheda.
Really?
Yeah, nobody kills you good like the British do.
Wow.
So,
the head is actually still...
Oh yes, they had to take him to England because the Irish would not, they wouldn't prosecute him because he was liked here. But in England, they were just happy enough to put an Irish man in chains and do all kinds of horrid stuff. So he's someone who's quite, he has the same haircut as me, ironically.
Wow.
Yeah. So same, if you see pictures of him, you see there's a bit of a forehead and the scruffy hair, so yeah. I
was actually going to ask that. Do you look back, do you look at, not photographs, obviously maybe paintings or whatever it was, and say, my God, I can see the family resemblance.
There is a portrait in my house, and he definitely does have my haircut, and he's got my side stare. It's what I call the pigeon stare, where you look sideways. Yeah, so he's definitely had that too. So I'd say I can definitely see that connection. And then there was my great-grandfather, who's writes under the name Lord Dunsany, who was one of the godfathers of fantasy literature. And he was very prolific, wrote something like 52 novels, and published 2,500 pieces of work. So he didn't sleep. So, and then there was Horace Plunkett, the founder of the co-ops, helped start the credit union banking system, and was the founder of the Department of Agriculture.
Incredible.
Yeah. So in this country, yeah, we've been busy.
Sure have. And actually, how did you then end up going? Because I do listen to some TED Talks, so I'll have to listen to yours. How did you get into TED Talks?
So,
and what was the conversation? What was it about?
I was nominated by a producer friend who is doing a documentary on me at the moment called Lord of Nature, and it basically documents my journey into the wild, so to speak. For those who don't know, I am an estate owner, but I converted a third of my estate into a concept which was new at the time called rewilding. And in fact, when I started it, it wasn't called rewilding, it was called nature conservation. But nature conservation sounds a lot like British people walking around Spain with sandals and socks on. It's not a very sexy term. So the moment I heard the term rewilding, yes,
Boom.
I'll take that. Thank you very much. You can put that on a t-shirt. So I was a rewilder, much better than a nature conservationist. So yes, so we did that, and yes, the Austrians had me over, and it was a beautiful, beautiful country. Fantastic food. To be honest, I felt a bit taken aback because I didn't realize that they are Jedi Knights level of nature out there. Because I'm used to Ireland where we walk around and there's a few sheep in a field, and that's nature. But over there were mountains, there were trees everywhere. It was very. So I thought to myself, oh, I feel a bit like a hack coming here talking about nature to these people who have nature literally outside the window. But I hold my own. I hold my own.
I'd say you did.
Yeah.
Have they different kind of nature?
They do. They have large mountains, and they're all very healthy. They all go jogging. Now, me personally, I'd be more keen to take the bus, but I walked a day up and down the mountain. I could tell you, I was struggling. The little old ladies were walking past me at speed, and I was there huffing and puffing. I put it down to the altitude, but I think it was the fact that, I drive everywhere these days, unfortunately.
That's what we do.
Yeah, not quite as young as I used to be. Yeah.
Well, you look great.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
How did filmmaking come into the scene with you?
So, birth. So
Birth.
when I was born,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the television was on. But no, I lived in New York, and my family worked very hard, so I spent a lot of time in our apartment, and it was New York in the 80s, so a lot of kidnapping. And when
Really?
you'd go
Wow.
to the supermarket, you'd have milk cartons full of all the faces of all the missing kids. And my parents wouldn't let me out very often because of that.
I wouldn't blame them, to be honest.
Well, to be honest, quite surprising. And I was a sort of like a cherub-looking kid, so perfect for kidnapping. So anyway, we spent a lot of time inside, and there was a really good video store at the end of the street run by, I believe, a Persian man. And it being Manhattan, there was a lot of very sophisticated people there. And my father was a very cultivated European. And we would rent, I'm 5 years old, so we'd rent videotapes. And at first it was Disney, but my father wasn't really satisfied with me watching just cartoons. And my father, being slightly questionable in sometimes his decisions, he thought it was a good idea to introduce me to classic Hollywood, to French Nouveau Vague, to Italian New Wave. Now, we're talking The Bicycle Thieves at the age of 5. So looking at it in retrospect, I don't know what my dad was thinking or what kind of crack he must have been smoking, but I grew up on those things. And the funny thing is, it was, when you look at filmmakers like Buñuel or Antonioni, these are not films that you watch casually. These are very intellectually heavy films, and I'm 5 years old. But I started watching the films, and eventually I didn't really care that much for the cartoons anymore. So from having a situation where I could rent one as long as I rented one of the others, I just got more interested in the classic Hollywood. I wanted to see Humphrey Bogart instead of Mickey Mouse.
Good choice.
Yeah. And I remember the biggest tragedy in my life was a movie called Le Ballon Rouge. And it was about this little boy who has no friends, and he gets befriended by the most beautiful red balloon. And he starts to have happiness, and then these horrible street kids throw rocks at the balloon and kill his balloon. Tragedy. I used to cry and cry myself to sleep. It was a tragedy. In fact, my parents didn't want to rent the film, and I demanded to rent it every week for about 6 months.
I'd say a lot of kids could actually identify with that kind of a story.
I know, but they didn't like the fact that I was so obsessed by it.
Yeah.
But it was an
But
obsession.
I think kids do get obsessed by certain
Absolutely.
movies.
That's why they put the age ratings on the
No,
films.
but they do. They definitely do
Yeah.
get upset. They want to watch the same thing over and over again,
But the funny thing is, that was the spark that got me interested in film. And it was the 80s, so there wasn't, it's not like today where, if I was interested in those things today, you'd give me a phone and I'd start making movies with my phone.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't that time. So we couldn't make films at home, and also I was too young to even know how to use a camera. So we started telling stories. So my father he figured out a very good incentive. He'd pay me pocket money for drawings and stories. So he became a patron of the arts. So what would happen is I would draw comic strips, these stories, these vivid stories with all kinds of monsters. There was a lot of monsters in mine. So monsters and terrible people, and there would be lots of action and explosions, sort of like a Bruce Willis movie. And I would draw these, and I would get a small amount of money for each one. And if I did a whole book, I'd get money. And you know what I'd spend it on? Sweets. Lots, copious amounts of sweets.
More movies.
Well, there was that. No, I got the movies sorted, but sweets. So my parents were fine with me destroying my teeth. I'd get new ones soon enough.
I think your mum and dad were quite ahead of themselves to actually have you do that, I think.
I would say that was quite a progressive upbringing, but I'm not sure I will do the same myself in every situation. But you know what? I certainly don't regret a word of it, because in the reality of it is I felt stimulated, and it's a fantastic thing to be stimulated by your parents. Mm-hmm. You know, I think nowadays a lot of people are so busy they don't get that, because you know there's school, there's work, people are burnt out at the end of the day. And it's not that my parents weren't burnt out at the end of the day, but they invested so much of intellectually into me, and I thank them for that.
Well done to them, because now you're a filmmaker as well. And I'd like actually to take a look at your work as a filmmaker. I'm going to start with a clip from Out There.
Hello? Help! Is there anybody there? Hello? Can anybody hear me? Is there anybody there?
So maybe you could tell me a little bit about that.
So that's a really interesting film, because I was very immature in my career at that point. I had made some smaller projects. I had never had any monies. To everything that I made, I had to kind of scrounge and save and, you know, work to get little bits and pieces to be able to afford. And that was the first film that I filmed somewhat like a professional. There was a proper camera. We had a crew. We weren't using construction lights, because my earlier films, we literally went to the hardware shop and we got like construction, you know, like those ones that the OPW has and the council. Those weren't they lacked finesse, let's just say that. So, but that one we actually filmed properly, and you know, it was never meant to be a big film or something. It was meant to be a sort of intermediate project, because I wanted to do things with special effects, and it took off because it hit a nerve right at the time where the zombie trend had come back in at around 2012, 2013. Horror was the taste of the time, and it just blew up. I think it did something like 50 festivals. It played in Cannes. It traveled all over the world. I got loads of awards. I got nominated for a Hatchet Award. I just wanted to say it. I got nominated for a Hatchet just because the prize was an actual hatchet. Imagine if I could put that on my... I never got it, but...
You never got it?
No, but I would have wanted one.
Were you supposed to get it?
Well, I would have been nice to win, but more because I just wanted an axe on my wall. How cool would have that been? Not a trophy. I wouldn't care if it was a trophy, but a hatchet.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
was some amount of awards that you received.
Exactly, and to be honest...
That was your first one, was it?
A first proper one,
Yeah.
yeah. But the thing is like, it wasn't that great of a film. So I sort of really had imposter syndrome because for whatever reason, it's one of those things that just blew up and it did not deserve it at all. But it wasn't completely by accident because I did find a way of working that was not, that was different. Because I realized that I had no money, no support, nothing. So I had to be persistent. So what I did to promote it, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I looked at every website, every publication that talked about films, and I wrote them. I absolutely bothered them. I would spend an hour and a half a day just emailing various publications every single day. I would have a cup of coffee, and I would literally find every blog, website, publication, newspaper, everyone, and I would bombard them with emails. Will you have a review? Do you do this? And most of the time, I never got a response. But for the thousands of emails that I sent, even about 10% wrote back, and that 10% led the film to getting, I suppose, a little bit of an interest because I figured out that, and I knew this from my own self, that if I look at a website and I see a picture or a trailer for something, I'm not going to click on it. And the second time I'll notice it, I'll associate something, oh, it's that film. But maybe by the third or fourth time, now I'm curious, I'm going to click on it. Yes. And I realized that if I'm like that, probably other people are like that too. And that was my strategy, flood them. And it worked. So I became very good at chasing people in car parks.
That's real dedication.
Yeah, well, you have to be a bit extreme if you want to get ahead. Unfortunately, no one gives it to you.
Well, I was going to say, no one's going to come save you or help you. Or
Nope.
That's kind of a myth. If you think you're going to be helped by people in your career or whatever you're passionate about, you've got to do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And people help, but it's up to you to take the first step. And well, like I said, I was chasing people in car parks. But it helped me and it worked. And I found a strategy because, if you don't have the money or don't have the resources, what I do have is time. And I made time. And, I had to get up early because it's not like I didn't have jobs and things to do. So 6 o'clock in the morning, morning coffee, hour and a half to 2 hours of emailing, going through the internet, looking for people to email, and just bothering people.
Well, then
politely.
You deserved
Oh, thank you very much. Well, it worked for me anyway.
Absolutely. And then you started your day at 8 o'clock.
Exactly. And then I got on with this stuff, and I was tweaked because I had to do 2 or 3 coffees because some of those websites were pretty shady. I'm sure I got loads of viruses on my computer as a result of it.
Nightmare.
Absolutely.
I'd like to move on.
Okay.
And show another clip, and we can discuss it afterwards.
Torchlight pierces the blackness of the factory as the 3 men enter. as they draw closer to the kids' hiding place.
Many of the baby turtles will be born at night. Alone and vulnerable, they are an easy target for predators. When the sun rises, they must commence their journey. Some will not succeed, but this is the first chapter in the life of the green sea turtle.
So could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's the Green Sea.
Sorry, the Green Sea. I never
Yeah.
mentioned it. Apologies.
That's all right. The Green Sea. That was an interesting movie because that film. So I learned, and I started to learn this without there, and I think, got very comfortable with it, with the Green Sea, where you started, at the beginning of my career, I tried to kind of mimic what other people were doing, trying to find sort of a pastiche of what other people did. And then I realized without there that I should really just write what I know, which is who I am, what my is. Now, obviously, that without sounding a bit narcissistic, the struggles that I have projected onto a piece of work becomes quite interesting because it's authentic. So with the Green Sea, I tried to project the feelings and emotions that I was having, and I wanted to boil it into a character, but I didn't want it to be just myself. I wanted to make something else, and at the same time reading the same language of my own emotions. And Catherine Isabel, who's the star of that, played a heavy metal listening, drunken, self-destructive person who's a writer. Sound familiar? So, looks and dresses a bit like me, to be fair. Foul-mouthed, full of spite, full of hatred, but at the same time kind of funny. And so I wanted to create a woman character that, especially because I find women fascinating, and I've always had a lot of strong women in my family, so I was always very keen on feminism. But I wanted a female character who was basically a nihilist. I don't think I'd seen too many of those, and especially who's so tough and abrasive. Like, it wasn't something I could picture any of the films I had seen before having really had a character in that kind of zest, especially in Ireland, where, we still have a lot of our conservative views, even passed down from the church and etc., to have someone who's so abrasive, so nasty, and yet at the same time so human, full of flaws. For me, that was a real personality that I wanted to explore. And although it started with emotions and feelings that I had, it took the form of something completely different. And it's a philosophical journey about someone who is suffering, and they find their way to correct their path. And there's lots of gentle nods to my life. I mean, the concept of the turtle, which is a heavy concept that bounces throughout the film, it's a metaphor for the weight of Dunsany on my shoulders, because the turtle is the animal that walks around with its home on its back.
Yes.
And if you look at the way the sets were decorated, they were all decorated with all the bits of information. They were always antlers, so at parts of her imagination, she sees the deer, she sees the forest, she gets only harmony in nature. So nature heals, and the whole journey was a way of self-healing, so she could live her potential and finally do what she needed to do, which was grow.
And did you feel that her performance, obviously echoing how you felt, was healing for you, to watch somebody else who's really portraying your healing journey?
I felt that, she had made it so much of her own that I felt that it was separate, but I really sort of felt with the subject matter. And Catherine Isabel really, for me, is one of the most underrated actors of today. And the thing with her performance is she was terrifying. I was terrified to work with her. When she would look at me between shots, she was that character. And for the longest part of the film, I thought she actually didn't like me, because she was that person. So every time I'd say anything, she would just give me the look, and
Staying in character.
Even the cameraman said to me, "Is like, do you mind staying in the room with me? She's terrifying." So I was very close to the action, but she was phenomenal. And to be honest, I think she was so human as well, because even at moments, during the very tragic moments, I felt very emotional about it, and it's something that I'm creating. So for me, it was very good. And the things that I wanted to portray in that film, when I finally finished that film, I really felt that a weight had been taken off me. And for someone who, for people who don't create like that or haven't figured out how to sort of regulate themselves, they probably won't understand this. But for me, I'm able to do something like that, and it's taking something out and leaving it as it is. I watch that film and I enjoy it. It's not a perfect film, but I enjoy, because I remember the things that I went through to get there, and for me, it still speaks to me today, and her performance was electrifying, and I'm very grateful for everybody who was involved to let me make that film.
Well, it's like almost lifting that turtle kind of house off your back, isn't it?
It is. It was the acceptance of a duty that I had to have, and that's what the film was about. It was about that, and because I felt a bit of success without there, my life didn't really take off. Well, I was thought that after the success of the film, I would I would be in the fast lane for success, but that never happened. I got lots of meetings, people were very interested, but nobody really wanted to work with me. There was no commitment from anywhere. And then I struggled to get a second project off the ground, and that's why there was such a gap between the films. I struggled for years, and then finally this was me coming to terms, because the film is about a woman who's been successful with her first book, struggling to finish the second. And again, that's...
I think it's you letting go, and then you're ready to go again.
Well, you write what you know, and I certainly could resonate with that.
And actually, do you act in any of your films?
No, just in life. Mostly I try and hide my bad mood with smiles.
I couldn't imagine you in a bad mood.
Oh, before coffee in the morning, I'm sure you'd change your mind. The hair looks about the same. But
Well, our final clip here this evening is from another short film called, and I actually meant to ask you, how do I pronounce this? So I'm going to try it my best. Marauder, is it?
Marauders.
Marauders. Why didn't I ask you that earlier on? I meant to ask you. What does that mean, actually?
It's actually a sort of, I would say, to me, it represents sort of a sort of like a rabble, like mercenaries of the ground. But marauders are typically like soldiers and battle people, and that's for me, that's what they are. They're sort of survivalists.
That's like a tongue twister when I say that. I'm actually tripping over my tongue saying it. Well, we'll just have a clip at that film, and I'll come back and speak to you about it.
Your move. Get anything good?
Your favorite.
Yay. What's that?
Try it. It's chocolate.
It's really sweet.
The rest, we trade.
Here.
You did really well today.
So can you tell me your inspiration actually for that film?
So that's actually not a short film. That's actually just a
Well.
piece of a bigger film that I hope to be making fairly soon. So I struggled a little bit with the script on that one. So I needed to kind of, one, give it a bit of a visualization that would help me see the film better. So we decided to make a section of the film, which was the beginning. And that's why there's all these characters that appear in it and don't seem to have a conclusion or resolution, because in reality, they are literally just starting to be introduced. So that story continues into a greater story, and that's what we hope to be doing next.
Lovely. Sounds
And
exciting.
it's actually, this time around, rather than turtle carrying its weight on its back, this is looking into a very bleak future where climate has become dysregulated,
Yes.
and food is scarce, and the people fight to survive, and climate and the environment has become toxic, has become hateful towards man, and we struggle to survive. And that's one possibility if we're not careful.
It is, yeah, for sure.
So I wanted to illustrate that, but with a paternal side as well, because, you know, the contrast is very important for me. You know, very dark stuff only works if you have something human or something warm within it. You have to have the shades. If it's just too much in one direction, it lacks the dynamic range. So, you know, there's that relationship of father and daughter, the relationship of love, and this sort of beauty of the little things in this backdrop of menace. And I feel that that's, again, like the Green Sea, trying to find those warm moments that keeps us human. Because the exploration of lost souls is kind of what I like to say is what I do. I find people who are lost to be the most interesting.
When I was watching your films, I found that the tall trees
Yeah.
and the music and all that, what I was wondering, was that actually shot in Dunsany Castle?
Everything of
That's what I
those
was
is shot
thinking,
in Dunsany.
yeah.
Now, not everything in every movie was shot in Dunsany, but generally, again, you work with what you got.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
you get inspiration from what you see. And both the poetry and the films, I'm part of Dunsany, so I write what I know. And the thing is, they are the inspiration, and nature tends to play a very heavy part in everything that I do. You see, all those movies takes advantage of nature. There's a lot of nature. It's a character of its own. And
It's like they're walking tall, stilted kind of human beings, almost like the trees have a life of their own. Just when you're looking up into the sky, and and the music is so captivating as well.
Yeah,
you know.
that's what I try and go for. And I always look for lost characters. Without there, the man was a guy who was a coward, you know, running away from his responsibilities. That's why he abandons, in fear, his girlfriend. You know, the Green Sea was someone who was also closing the world to herself. She was swallowed in darkness, and the house became her whole world. And Marauders, it's something different. They are also struggling. They are fighting the very world that they live in. And that is something that I don't like characters. I like weak characters, because weakness is something that shouldn't be, it needs to be celebrated, because when you can accept the fact that you have weaknesses, you can make them into strengths.
And how does the castle and the estate obviously run on a daily basis for you?
With a lot of elbow grease.
Absolutely.
So I like to say that I am not an owner. I am a caretaker. My job when I was born, and it was since I was born, I was raised with the understanding, you are never going to be the owner. You are just the caretaker of this generation. Your job is to protect the things of the past so that the stories and hardships of others never are forgotten, and to try and do something of your own, to bring something for your people, for your time, and then most importantly, prepare for the future so that the future can do the same. And I think that this is a very interesting thing. My family has always done this, but I think it's also something that perhaps should be mimicked by many families, because the reality of it is if we all lived with that kind of mindset, we might have a very different world. And the thing is, I feel I try and stay humble. It's very easy to fall into a habit of thinking one thing or the other, thinking that you're special or that you're have an advantage. But the reality of it is, I try and keep everything as humble as possible. It's not always easy, but so I clean things, I do things. I treat the place like it's a museum that's not run by the government.
Yeah.
You know, I look after it, I tend to it, and I treat I for years associated as the building. And then I had an awakening and realized that it wasn't the building was just a piece. It's actually the very ground, the very trees. So it wasn't just the building as a canvas, the whole place was a canvas. And I would populate it with trees because I looked at the trees that I'd walk in, and many of them were planted 300 or 400 years before, and I thought to myself, I need to make sure that there are 300 and 400-year-old trees for those great-great-great-grandchildren.
And you need to put your own stamp onto the estate as well.
Well, I like to say I like to put a little bow on nature sometimes, make it a little bit more charming.
They're going to be saying, look at that cool Baron who was a filmmaker.
And you wouldn't have believed that I absolutely didn't like nature for the longest period. I used to find going outside to be terrible because I liked concrete. I liked rock clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a rocker. So for me, it was all about going to out all night and hanging around in warehouses and all this kind of stuff. You know, very punk rock. And now I'm a big hippie walking around in boots.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've still got the heavy metal t-shirts though.
And explain actually about, because this is you obviously giving back, explain about the return of species to the estate due to rewilding that you have initiated.
So with every generation has its battle. You know, in my great relatives' time, there was poverty, there was famine, there was all kinds of stuff. And every generation had to do something. Now, in my Horace Plunkett's time, education was a problem because we become a republic, yet, you know, what's the point having freedom if you can't do anything with it? The only way we're truly going to be free is if we're intellectually free, if we can think, if we can have opportunities. Otherwise, it's an illusion. So, obviously, we have all those things now. Those needs have been covered largely. But what I discovered and what I thought I could have an effect on was nature, because nature didn't have a champion. It didn't have a lobby. And our biggest fear now is climate change. It's what's going to affect generations to come, if there is even going to be a future. But I'm a person who says we ain't licked till we're licked. So I said, right, I'm going to do my bit. And, you know, people can say to me, oh, but, you know, China. I'm like, I'm not in China. I'm in Ireland. I'm going to do my bit for my piece. You should do your bit for your piece. And if we all did it, all these raindrops will turn into an ocean. And with an ocean, we can have waves.
Yes.
And that's what I set out to do. Now, I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't tell you the difference between an oak tree and a beech tree when I started. I was as ignorant as you could get. But you know what? I quickly learned. I said to myself, I have to be knowledgeable of all things. So I started walking. I didn't like it. I treated it like medicine, you know, down with a spoon. And I started learning. I would pick one or two things and I would study them. And then gradually, as the rewilding took place, and at the time I didn't know what it was I was doing, but I knew that nature didn't need us. I knew that nature knew what it actually needed. And with time, nature would look after itself. And guess what? I was absolutely right, because as time went on, nature came back. I started, from only having the sound of crows when I woke up in the morning, I started hearing songbirds. And then there were at least one new species returned every year. And then I realized that I was being selfish because I kept it a secret for the longest time. Because I said, well, the whole world is terrible. I'm just going to do my piece. It's up to the rest of the world to do their piece. And then I realized, no, that's stage 1. Stage 2 was I had to be a voice. Stage 3 is everybody's got a voice.
Yes.
That was the idea. And it's working.
Well, you know what? You're such an interesting man. Baron, should I say. We've come to the end of the interview. Flies in, doesn't it?
I know.
It flies in.
And it was
It's gone
such a
before you
pleasure
know
as
it.
well.
Absolute pleasure. I'd actually like to end the interview on your dog, General Chow.
General Chow.
Can
yeah.
you tell us a little bit about him before we go?
He was a beautiful, beautiful Jack Russell. Gave me and my family a lot of pleasure. He was a personality. He would talk. And unfortunately, he died there a few days ago, and it was a real tragedy in our lives. Because for me, there is no difference between animals and people.
There isn't, no.
We separate ourselves from animals, but the reality of it is they have wants and needs and ideas and feelings, and just because we don't understand necessarily what they say doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And we lost him, unfortunately, very tragically to an attack from other dogs, and it was a bit like a Greek tragedy because he was killed by his children. So very Greek tragedy-esque. But that is nature at the end of the day, and we honor him. And it's a tradition in our family to always bury the dogs at the feet of the parents. So he's buried at the foot of my mother, and his father and grandfather are both buried at the feet of my dad. So, and I lost another dog there, and one day I'll have dogs at my feet too. And if you go back 500 years and look in the church in Dunsany, you will see a tomb with a man and a woman and a Jack Russell at the feet.
Well.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much for having
I
me.
have to say, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been a pleasure to work with here on the Irish Art Show.
It's been an honor.
Thank you. Thanks so
Thank
much. Wow. Oh my God.
That was okay.
That was just incredible. I enjoyed every bit of having Randal Plunkett here this evening, and probably one of my favorite interviews, I have to say. I really enjoyed interviewing you. You're very special, and keep shining.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody at home. On behalf of myself, Angel, and all the crew, we'll see you again next week. Until then, good night.